Fair comment. Kezia Dugdale wins the defamation case brought by the Wings Over Scotland blogger. We'll reflect on the details of the sheriff's judgment. And as the climate change protests continue, just how realistic are the activist demands? The former Scottish Labour leader Kezia Dugdale has successfully defended a defamation case brought against her by the Wings Over Scotland blogger Stuart Campbell. The case centred around a tweet Mr Campbell had sent in 2017 about the Conservative MSP Oliver Mundell and his MP father David, who's gay. The pro-independence writer said in court that it was a satirical criticism of the younger politician's public speaking style. But in a Daily Record column published soon after the post, Ms Dugdale referred to him as having written homophobic tweets and spouting hatred and homophobia towards others. In his ruling, Sheriff Ross found that it was incorrect to imply that Mr Campbell was homophobic, but he concluded that the politician's views amounted to offence of fair comment. After the ruling, the MSP gave her reaction.
Well, this case, first and foremost, is a really good result for me on a personal level, but I think it's got huge ramifications for the whole of Scotland. It's about a healthy and free press. It's about citizens' ability to say what they think without ending up in court. And the Sheriff has ruled today that citizens are entitled to say what they think as long as what they say is fair and honestly held. I'm disappointed that our courts have allowed this to get to the stage that it has, with so much money spent on each side in legal advice. I'm sure our courts have better to do than deliberate what's written in the Daily Record day after day. But I'm hugely grateful to the Daily Record for the support and the legal advice that they've given me over the past 2 years. I wouldn't have been able to get here today without them.
Well, Stuart Campbell responded to the judgment, maintaining that he had won the case in almost every sense and that Dugdale had got away with defaming him. He also described her as an idiot who doesn't know what words mean. Well, to reflect on the judge's ruling, where it leaves the two individuals and the wider issue of freedom of speech, we're joined by STV's special correspondent Bernard Ponsonby and the media lawyer David McKee. Thank you both for joining us this evening. David, what did you make of the ruling?
I wasn't surprised. I thought she would win. And the reason that I thought she would win is because fair comment is a very wide defence. It's got a wide latitude. In fact, it's probably a misnomer. Fair comment, the comment doesn't always need to be fair, provided it's an opinion, it's based on a factual premise, and it's a matter of public interest, and it's a genuinely held belief. So there were 4 boxes that Kezia Dugdale needed to tick, and she ticked all 4 of those boxes.
And it doesn't have to be correct. He said a comment can sometimes be fair even if it's wrong.
Well, that was his opinion. The irony of this is that the judge expressed an opinion in the judgment. When a judge expresses an opinion, he's expressing a view as well, which in a sense is a comment. So we're entitled to comment on that. Some people might agree with the judge, others might not. It's a bit like football with referees. People talk about consistency. But I thought the sheriff in this case got the law right.
Bernard, what did you make of the ruling?
I wasn't entirely surprised about it. If we go back to the initial comments that Stuart Campbell made, there is no doubt that they were offensive. They were offensive if you're Oliver Mundell. They were offensive if you were David Mundell. The key question was, were they homophobic? He says they were not homophobic. They were a satirical comment. Kezia Dugdale's view was that they were homophobic. Now, during the 3 days of evidence, there were evidence about working definitions of what homophobia actually is. It doesn't appear to me that in the evidence, at least, that they've actually made the case that the tweet was actually homophobic. But nevertheless, Kezia Dugdale was entitled to her opinion that the tweets were homophobic. And what you have here, therefore, is 2 protagonists taking diametrically opposite points of view on a particular tweet. And you have the judge, in this case, the sheriff, who has to make a determination. And his determination was that from Kezia Dugdale's perspective, this was fair comment, even although the judge believed that her fair comment was inaccurate.
OK, I mean, some people are saying it's a bit of a fudge because Kezia Dugdale and Stuart Campbell are both saying they've been vindicated here.
Well, that often happens at the end of a court case. I don't think it was a fudge. The judge had to come down on one side or other of the legal argument. We have an adversarial legal system. Judges have got a difficult job to do. I'm not sure whether he would have been caught in two minds during the case. I do know that that is possible. And when you're in court, you don't always know the way that the judge is going to go or what he or she is thinking. So, but at the end of the day, he had to make a decision. And as I say, there is an elasticity to the defence of fair comment that's quite different from standing up facts. The defence on a factual news article is quite different. That's very narrow. Fair comment is very wide.
There's no doubt, I think, that in the technical sense, Kezia Dugdale won. At the end of the day, she was not held liable for damages for the alleged defamation. On the other hand, Stuart Campbell will say that he decided to go to court because it was a matter of his personal integrity that he established that he wasn't a homophobe. The judge has accepted that, and indeed the observation from the judge is that he has a track record actually arguing on the equalities agenda. I would have been interested to know what legal advice Mr. Campbell was actually given, because I'm sure his lawyer would have said, well, at the end of the day, they can either go down the route of veritas, that what Ms. Dugdale says is true, or it's fair comment. Because if the fair comment defence was explained to Stuart Campbell by his legal team, it was always going to be the case that this is almost a toss of the coin, because it depends on which way the judge is going to come down.
So where does this leave us in terms of freedom of speech? I mean, it is OK to accuse someone of being homophobic now if you believe that to be true?
Well, no, it's not just about your belief. Your belief has to be an honestly held belief, but it also has to have a degree of factual basis and have a public interest element as well. So, as I said at the beginning, there were 4 boxes that she had to tick. And by the way, what Stuart Campbell had was very much a stateable and arguable case. This appears to have been quite a close case. And as I say, the judge has got a difficult decision to make. But in terms of freedom of speech, I think it's a victory for freedom of speech, as Kezia Dugdale said, in Scotland. It reinforces the importance of people being allowed to air opinions, even if those opinions appear to be the ramblings of a crackpot. That, in Scotland, is something that we should continue, in some respects, to allow.
And where does this leave us in terms of politics and the law, Bernard?
Well, I mean, if you look at social media in particular, and you've got a media lawyer here, that David, he could probably go on the exchanges which take place between political opponents and look at these exchanges every day of the week and say, if that's not true, that individual has been defamed. The bottom line is that people defame one another, technically, by the legal definition, every single day of the week in terms of the political discourse. What hasn't happened up until now, and this is why this case was interesting, was 2 protagonists within the political community who have taken their differences to court. And at the end of the day, the reason why politicians tend not to go to court and politicians seek legal advice on whether they've been defamed all the time is that access to justice is fine. Access to justice is only a reality if you've got deep financial pockets.
I mean, David, do you think this will make people more or less wary when they kind of take to Twitter now to write things about people?
Well, the answer to that is I don't have a clue, because social media continues to surprise me every day of the week, and it depends on the individual. I think it's very unusual and surprising that this case ended up in court. It's very rare that these cases actually run to court. Not many defamation actions go to court. It's very rare that I would advise somebody to go to court because, as Bernard points out, number one, it's a very expensive business. You can get legal aid, but that's difficult in itself. And secondly, it's a complex area. Law is a grey area. I keep saying this to clients, it's a grey area. It's not black and white, and it does come down to a judge's interpretation of the law and sometimes of the facts too. In a sentence, Bernard, do you think it'll make people more or less?
Well, I suppose the moral of the story is that people who are engaged in the political process should learn to be civilised to one another. Any chance that will happen? Absolutely not.
But you set such a great example, Bernard. There you go. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us this evening.